Welcome to Relatable 2.0 with the experts. This next series will focus on Know Your Worth. First up, Vivian Dixon, talent acquisition leader extraordinaire. We get into all of it: negotiating compensation, how candidates can convey their worth, and why questions are so valuable. Great insight and counsel that is real and practical. Enjoy this episode. Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Teresa.
Welcome, welcome.
It's good to see you. It's been too long.
It's great to see you. And you're a very busy human. So let me start by saying, first, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. You were someone in a previous, I interviewed you previously. So if people are listening or watching us, you can go back and hear our first interview where you learn all about Vivian and her path and career. And she gives amazing advice in the context of being an acquisition leader and really a business leader. And so I loved our interview, and so did our audience. We had a lot of listens to your interview. And so as I iterate and think about this podcast and trying to strengthen it and develop it and grow it in different ways, we've talked about this concept of some of these themes and then bringing in experts to talk about those themes. And you were one of the first people I thought of, and you graciously said yes. So thank you so much for that. And since we last talked, I think you've changed roles. So maybe let's just start real quick with like a quick update with what's going on with you right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Teresa. It's always a pleasure. I know the first time we did this together, it took me a minute to jump online with you, but I was excited after we were done. So happy to be here. So now I lead talent acquisition as well as the HR business partner function for a tech startup. So if you know anything about me, you know I'm not afraid to jump into the fire. And many people actually start their career at startup. And I'm probably on my sunset cruise at a startup, which is funny because I'm doing the opposite. But it's been a ton of fun, wearing a ton of hats all the time, which is the nature of startup. Lots of change, and it's been a really fun time.
Good. Awesome. All right. So we continue in our world of acquisition. And so it's a perfect lead into our first question. So our first theme is Know Your Worth. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, with respect to that topic. And I'm interested in hearing from you, given your perspective as an acquisition leader and all of your experience and history. So I think it's going to be great for our listeners as they kind of think about these topics, both personally and professionally. So for you as an acquisition leader, what does it mean in the context of your experience as an acquisition leader? Like if I throw that term out to you, Know Your Worth, what sort of surfaces?
Oh, good question. So first, I think everyone needs to be very grounded on what they're great at. Where is your gift? What is your superpower, right? So we all have gifts that we were given, and many times people will just say, "Oh, that's not a big deal." Right? So if you look at any professional, any person that's a master at what they do, that person makes it look easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if something is easy to you, comes easily to you, it's probably your gift. So first and foremost, acknowledge and be very deliberate about what you're great at and you're not great at. Once you know what, this is my lane, this is my wheelhouse, XYZ factors are the things that make me great, and I know the circumstances in which I am great, then you can then be very grounded in what you're worth. Right? So some of us are better at math. Some of us are better at soft skills. Some of us are better at engineering. Some of us are better at anticipation. Some of us are better at, quick decision making. Other people are better decision making with, sleeping on it. And so whatever your strength is, be very, very aware of what that is. Now, when it comes to translating that into a job search, then you have to find the ideal sweet spot is a role where the hiring manager is looking for someone with many of your skills, maybe not all, and they align to your superpowers, and therefore they're willing to pay for that. Okay. I'll tell you a quick story.
Yes.
One of my daughter, number 2, she called me one day and she was sharing, she's like, "Mom, I need a raise." And I said, Tell me why, right? So I'm smiling inside because I really want to understand her mental model. And she was going through this conversation around how she and several of her colleagues were just talking about, compensation. And first, I cautioned her, please don't do that. And secondly, I had to do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, I said, well, look, she said one of her colleagues was upset that she was making more money than she does. And the medical field is not my superpower, so I can't speak to all the intricate details. But I said to her, I said, I recall you were hired because of your specific skill in handling children and babies with this particular gastro gap or need. So this particular medical issue, you have a skill set it. She said yes. I said, do any of your colleagues have that skill? No, Mom. Okay, well then that is actually why you're being paid more. You bring a skill to the table that others don't have. It's a small analogy, right? So many times candidates get confused and they believe, well, every single person should make the exact same amount of money to the dollar. And your superpower and your skill set is worth something. And so as you translate that into compensation, I'll tell you a theme that I see. Generally speaking, women tend to concede. They concede faster. And it's not to say they don't negotiate, but they tend to concede faster. Men can, I won't say they always will, but they can reach for the stars. So you have this like delta in the negotiation where a male may, go for what we call in the comp world, the 120th percentile of the market. And a female may go for the 75th percentile, and they may concede at 80th, and the man is still looking at 110. So while I don't believe in it being fully about gender, that's not my point. My point is be super deliberate about what you're great at. Don't be apologetic about the price point that it costs,
Yeah.
and do your homework, right? You should be aware of what is the range of skill sets in the particular domain that are needed for the job and how much your skills are worth. And if you feel, you know what, I'm 10, 20% off, then seek to close that gap and find a way to do that.
Oh my gosh, so many salient points, especially with respect to the analogy and the story you gave with the skill set, because I think that was one of the things growing up as an internal HR person for a long time that handled comp and administered comp. You would see these amazing salaries in the consulting world, right, on the delivery side in terms of the consultants compared to those of us internally. And I remember having at a younger, less experienced point of view, well, I should be making as much as them. I'm the same age as them, whatever that means. And I think it was, oh, there's a skill set, there's a technical component, right? They're also generating revenue in a consulting environment. You're not, right? And eventually I mitigated risk, and that had some real dollar value to it. But to your point of recognizing what the skill is, and then seeing how that applies in the market and what that differentiator is so important. And then I also loved what you said about just framing it in terms of negotiation, because I think gender neutral people have a lot of mixed feelings. They don't know how to do it. They don't know if they can or they should or they shouldn't. So I think the context in which you put that is really helpful. And then the idea that know what it is that you want to do first. I do, we spend a lot of time in the coaching practice with just that, because people think, I don't know, they're driven by other things. But if you kind of narrow that part down, like you said, it just is easier. It's an easier go at everything if you're kind of connecting to what you're really meant to be doing.
Yes,
Sure.
and Teresa, I know one of the things that's actually super interesting in that negotiation, and I'll share with you my professional point of view, that it's a failed tactic. Sometimes candidates will say, I won't give you my price. Come with me with your best. It's actually a very failed tactic. It's kind of best other analogy I could give you. It's like saying I'm going to meet your best trusted person in your network, and we're going to go out for dinner, and I don't have any idea of what their requirements are. I have no idea. Are they allergic to X food? Do they absolutely detest eating at certain types of restaurants? Like, you're walking into a situation blind and then hoping to negotiate your best deal. It doesn't work. And so for any candidates listening, you want your recruiter and the hiring team to know at least a general ballpark of where you're looking at. And then you can actually end that conversation early if frankly they can't afford you. Not every company can afford every talent. And some, hyperscalers or tech companies can afford more, or say a new investment area for a business, right? So let's pretend if you're working in the automotive industry and they're now moving into electronic vehicles and had not before, they may invest more in you if you have that skill set versus someone who's been in the space for a while. And so you have to really think through, not just are they willing to do it, but are they able to do it? And both the willing and able are factors as hiring managers determine what they're going to pay. Some businesses just simply can't afford that price. And so knowing that up front is helpful.
Yes, for sure. And it like saves a lot of time for everybody because
Of
then
course.
you're
Yeah.
not grinding on in interviews and it's not getting delayed and all. It's almost, yeah, that's a great point. The other thing you mentioned at the beginning, which I think is important too for people that are less experienced, when you said, are you good at this or are you good at this? And you went through your list. I think for some people, your experience is an education. So that's going to evolve in terms of how you grow professionally. And you might start somewhere and then you might say, oh my gosh, for me, I on the HR world, I did a lot of risk mitigation. That's where I started landed. I was very good at it. And then as the second act, it's really about like coaching and development and growth. And right. So I think you can be good at something and you can cultivate that and grow it and turn it into a career. And then you can also, as you're growing, pay attention to the signs and the signals because that can shift and change.
Relatable is sponsored by TFA Soft Skills, your one-stop shop for workshops, coaching, speaking, and soft skills development. If you'd like to hire Teresa or any members of her team, please visit www.tfasoftskills.com for more information.
Absolutely. And look, sometimes being a great fit inside of a company is worth something. So you may, two jobs apparently on the surface created equal. You may
Right.
have a job one that pays you a little bit less, but your connection to the culture, to the people is higher than one that pays more. And so you may actually opt to take the role that pays slightly less because I've found that money can only take it so far.
Yeah. Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
unless it's like, someone is getting 2x the comp or something like that, a small differential in compensation is not going to make up for happiness.
All right, let me ask you another question with respect to, you mentioned you tell me your best offer and then I'll tell you my comp. What are some other mistakes or gaps that you see when it comes to this topic in the market in terms of people knowing their worth, whether it's being able to articulate that value to you? Because that's a lot of what I work on with people is I think they have a really hard time talking in terms of value to an organization. So tell me from your perspective in acquisition, what are
Yeah.
the gaps you see?
Oh, good question. So first is candidates may not realize that the recruiter could or could not, depending on the company, ask them the right questions about how to think about their compensation. So don't assume your recruiter is great at compensation. I know it sounds ironic, but having led a lot of recruiters, it varies, right? And it varies in the market and varies in who you touch. And so the recruiter themselves, you want to probe, help me understand the philosophy of the company. Help me understand how I should think about this bonus. Help me understand, is this something that is probable to receive or possible to receive? And there's a difference between probability and possibility. I mean, it may be improbable that you receive it, right? So you really want to probe on the different components of the compensation. Many times people focus too much on the base salary, right? And they don't focus on the total comp, and earnings could be greater if they've got bigger rewards. So if the candidate is too narrowly focused on base, they could actually miss out on stock and long-term incentives that actually benefit them in the long run. So really understanding compensation, not just through the recruiter, go online. Read what people say about the compensation, learn about, what you can, doing that homework about how that company treats comp. And if you can't find anything, then use that opportunity to ask in a few different ways how the compensation components work. Typically, there's short-term incentives and long-term incentives. Base salary is just one factor. And so really understanding the math is really important, really understanding the long-term potential of the comp and not just here and now cash flow, will really be beneficial. I remember actually being at a company, I won't say the name, a prior company, and chatting with one of our head of compensation. And I said to her, why don't we do X like another hyperscaler? Because, they vest their stock quarterly, and there's high appetite for that more frequent vest. And we had a real intellectual conversation around it. And she said to me, Vivian, but our value is greater. And I said, well, tell me more. Because of course we get candidate feedback that they vest quarterly. It takes us longer. And she said, yes, they vest more frequently, but the value in the dollar is less. So the perception of comp and what they're making, they feel better because they vest quarterly, but they make less money there. And so that's a super, super important factor to realize. Like, maybe you're not willing to wait for the vest schedule at a certain company, and that's okay. You have to be grounded with that, but don't be disillusioned by a longer vest schedule, which could actually be more fruitful.
Absolutely. And that ties to the benefits package overall, because I think I've had a lot of conversations on the benefits side with 401k match and other things. But if you're getting stock and you're getting at a startup, let's say, and they're not ready to do 401k match, but you're getting ownership, right? That's a decent trade-off. So I think your idea of or instruction to really understand what you're getting and what that means, and don't be afraid to ask the questions if you're not sure, I think is really important. And then what about more on the, from an interview perspective, or let's see if I can how to ask this, but it's like the comp side in terms of knowing your worth, it's a very clear conversation around kind of what you can do and not do. In terms of the interview aspect and people kind of coming to the table with their stories and talking about what they do and that value and being able to translate that in a way, what resonates with on the other side of the table, right? With respect to that.
Oh gosh, good question. It's super important as a candidate that the stage of the team that you'd be joining in their maturity.
Okay.
So are they a new team, newly formed team that's on a mission to do X thing? Have they been in place for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years? Has the team been intact, or is it maybe the function has been in place for a while, but the team themselves are new? The reason why that's important is because you want to know where your lane is in the maturity level, right? So if it's an immature team, the team may actually benefit from your skills from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because you saw that early, sort of migration and growth of a team or a function. If it's a mature team and they're trying to transform, that's a very different need and skill set. So understanding the team dynamics, where you play in, are you a key contributor or a contributor? There's not a right answer there. Not everyone is going to be the key contributor, but you want to align where you fit versus the maturity of the org. Once you do that, then you can figure out, is this for me? First and foremost, right? For candidates, they should learn to opt out earlier, right? It shouldn't be, oh, we wait for the team to tell me that I'm not a fit. If it's not a fit, candidates should opt out earlier and realize it's not a fit for them. It could very well be that that just culturally, the organization doesn't align, and that's okay. It's actually better for you to opt out and say, you know what, I'm going to invest my time in an organization or a team that's more aligned with my skill set. And it could be anything from the chemistry, the culture, or the mission of the organization, right? So I would say figure that out early. And once you do, then you can tailor your responses to the maturity level and how you can help that team.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. It's, and really what you're describing too is, really doing your research and preparing and finding out as much information as you can. And I think people, especially when you get into this mode of like applying to 100 jobs at one time, and then maybe you don't know what you applied to, and then you get the phone screen call and you're kind of caught off guard, and so whatever that's in your control to make sure that you're grounded and you've done your research, I think is going to help you be more marketable and more successful in that process.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, look, I
Okay.
think
Yeah, go.
something as simple as I always share with candidates, don't ask a question that you could find on the web with an easy search.
Right.
So if it's like
Yes.
an easy
Yes.
Google search would tell you the size of the company, how many countries are they in? Look, you could probably figure that out really quickly between the job postings
Yes.
or looking at their location, about us, or some about us section on the website. So don't waste, usually as a candidate, you only get an opportunity to ask 3 questions. Don't waste it on something you could
Right.
Google really easily. You could use that information though for a richer question. So the richer question could be, I noticed that you opened a new facility in Germany. Tell me more about that, and how many employees do you have there? Versus saying, how many countries are you in, right? Very
Right.
different depth of
For
conversation.
sure.
Because now you're trying to figure out what motivated the company to open an office in an international location, for example.
And it shows that curiosity. It demonstrates a lot of things just in that question, which I think is compelling when you're in an interview for sure. I was always big on like what questions people asked me because I felt like it was a sign of critical thinking and a sign of like, yeah, I'm doing more than just showing up here. Okay. So
Yes.
as we wrap up this topic, any other advice that you have for folks, like with respect to this umbrella of, know your worth, anything that you've seen work well, that helps people kind of cultivate or strengthen this capability? I mean, we've talked a lot
Oh,
already,
yes.
but any other advice?
The last thing I would say is timing.
Okay.
We're about to move into the fall. It's about to be Halloween, Thanksgiving, at least in the US, Christmas time. And Q4 tends to be a much quieter time for hiring. And so be careful not to get frustrated if you don't get phone calls, or if you had it in your mind, let's make it up. I'm going to start my job search October 1 and I'm going to land a job by November 1. The timing is just not at its best. It's the equivalent of saying, I'm going to the beach and, going to get the perfect tan, and you decide to do that in December. Unless you're going to the Caribbean, is probably not going to happen, right? So timing matters, and be very, very aware of, depending on the cycle of the business, their fiscal year, and the timing of the market, when is the best time to search? And you may decide, you know what, I'm going to park my job search for a little bit until the timing is better. Just like real estate, just like life, right? Isn't it all
Yeah.
about timing with everything, with relationships?
Yeah.
Even how we met, right? It was a
Yes.
timing
Yeah.
factor, so timing matters.
Timing matters. And I also think the election in the US is also, there's, when you think about federal government and you think about agency hiring, like that also is going to be in a bit of, right? Because they're working out their budgets, but they're also, it's a time of change.
Sure. And where will the investments be, right? Is it more
Right,
civilian?
for
Is
sure.
it more DoD or what have you?
Yeah.
And so, so know the cycle of the business that you're going in.
Yeah.
And then try to leverage, the sort of perfect sweet spot, versus like, it's not impossible to get a job in Q4. It's just much harder.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that. We're going to move.
Oh, you're
on
welcome.
Thank you, relatable experts. Your advice and counsel is so valuable. Thank you, relatable audience. Please rate, subscribe, leave comments, and share this podcast with others. Until next time, this is Career Coach T. Stay connected.